In this week's Parsha, we have the story of two wars. Or rather, one war, we have the story of the war itself, the story of the Milchama against Midian. And then later on in the Parsha, there's a discussion about the future conquest of Eretz Yisrael. Now, there's a huge difference between these two wars. In the case of Midian, the point was not about taking over the land. And in the simple psukim, the Yidden don't settle in the land of Midian. It was more about taking revenge against Midian because what they have done to the Yidden. And therefore, they were supposed to kill the Midianim. As opposed to the war that's going to be taking place in Eretz Yisrael, which was mainly about getting the land in order to settle there. The Rebbe says, based on the understanding of the difference between these two types of wars, we'll be able to explain a question that the Raavad has on the Rambam. The Rambam paskins that even though the Leviim usually don't take part in the spoils in the wars of Eretz Yisrael, but if it's not in Eretz Yisrael, then the Leviim do take part of the spoils, if it's a war elsewhere. So the Raavad asks, well, what about in this war against Midian? In the spoils in the war against Midian, Midian is clearly not part of Eretz Yisrael. The Leviim did not take part of the spoils. It's only that the Yidden later had to give them some of what they have gotten. They had to give them as a truma or as a tax. They had to give to the Leviim. So clearly, even a war outside of Eretz Yisrael, the Leviim are not taking the spoils. Now, the Kesef Mishnah responds to that and says, on the contrary, the actual fact that the Leviim are at least getting something of this, that itself tells you that because it's not in Eretz Yisrael, that's why they get some of it. Because if it would have been in Eretz Yisrael, they wouldn't have gotten any of it. But the Rebbe says this answer of the Kesef Mishnah is not completely understood because the bottom line is they didn't get part of the regular spoils. It's only that the Yidden had to share some of what they got with the Leviim as a truma. But based on the explanation that we gave that there's a major difference between the Milchama of Midian, which was only for the sake of revenge, not as taking over the land, we can now understand the Rambam. Because when the Rambam says that the Leviim do take part of the spoils in other lands, that's only in the lands that they're taking over and conquering to take over the land. But in the Milchama of Midian, which is a different category, it's purely for the revenge, that wouldn't be included in this, and therefore the Leviim are not taking part of the spoils. But the Rebbe asks and says that here's the problem. The Rambam paskins that when a siege is placed on a city in order to capture the city, to take over the city, we don't surround the city from all four sides. We leave one side empty so that the people in the city could run away. And he actually says that we learned this from Milchemes Midian, from the war against Midian. Now, from the simple reading of the Rambam, it sounds like Midian is part of, like any other land that's taken over to capture, to take the city, which sounds like Midian was also taken in order to capture and take over the city, not only about revenge. Furthermore, if in fact it would only be for revenge, then why are we allowing some of them to escape? And if so, we're back to square one with the question of the Raavad. If Milchemes Midian is in fact for conquering and taking over the land, then why aren't the Leviim taking a part of the spoils like everyone else, since this is a city outside of Eretz Yisrael? So the Rebbe says, we have to say that according to the Rambam, within the Milchama of Midian, there's actually two Gdorim. There's two aspects to it. On the one hand, yes, it is a Milchama of revenge, but on the other hand, it is at least similar to the other countries that we conquer, that a king conquers the city. In other words, on the one hand, yes, it is like other wars, which is kibush, which is conquer it, not only revenge. And the proof of this is, because if it would be purely for revenge, then why don't we wipe everyone out, just like it was in the case of Amalek? From the fact that they weren't commanded to kill out all of the Midyanim, furthermore, they took spoils, etc., means that there was some element of kibush, of conquering over here. And for this reason also, we leave them a room to escape, because it's not purely only about the revenge. In fact, it's from this war that we learn for all the other wars. If even in this war we're letting them escape, how much more so in other wars? So that's on the one hand, that there is an element also over here of kibush, of conquering the land. But on the other hand, since it's mainly not about conquering, it's more about the revenge, therefore we can't compare it to every other land that's taken over in the regular way, in which the Leviim usually would take part, as opposed to here, where the Leviim don't take part of the spoils. But the Rebbe says, if that's the case, we still need to understand, then why do we need to give anything to the Levium at all, even this Truma Samechas, even this Truma as a tax or as a portion to give to the Levium? Says the Rebbe, we're going to understand this by first looking at another unique aspect of Milchemes Midyan. Even though usually Shevet Levi doesn't even go out to war, nevertheless, according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, the Levium did go out to this war. And the Ragachover explains that this opinion would be that it's so because the same idea, because this is a war of revenge as opposed to a war of conquering land. But here's the question. The reason why the Levium usually don't go out to war is, as the Rambam says, because they were separated from the ways of the world, they are serving Hashem, etc., and therefore they don't wage war. So why is it that if it's a war of revenge, would they participate? So the Rebbe explains, the reason why Shevet Levi, as we just said, doesn't go out to war is because they're serving Hashem, they're the army of Hashem. And that's why they usually don't participate in war. And therefore, says the Rebbe, it could also be understood that if it's a Milchama, a war, that's not connected with conquering land, like the regular way of the world, but rather it's a war that's fighting on Hashem's behalf, as the Pasuk says, Loseis Nikmas Hashem b'Midyan, to wage the war of Hashem against Midyan. Therefore, this is part of their task, part of their job, as Chel Hashem, as the army of Hashem, to participate in this war. Says the Rebbe, now we can also understand why we give them some sort of tax or a teruma at the end of this war. This emphasizes that this war is very different to other sorts of wars, where we're just fighting to take the land. This is a war on behalf of Hashem, and therefore we take some of the spoils and we're giving it to Hashem. We give it, the way we're giving it to Hashem is we're going to give some to Elazar, some to the Leviim. But the point is that part of this is being separated to show that this was really a war of Hashem. Says the Rebbe, there's still another problem. There's still something else we need to understand. From the Rambam, it sounds like that in the wars of conquering other lands, not only do Shevet Levi get a part of the land and the spoils, but they also go out to war. And here's the question. In other lands, not by Midyan we said it's Nikmas Hashem, that's why the Leviim are going out. But if it's other lands outside of Eretz Yisrael, what connection do those wars have to the Leviim? Says the Rebbe, there's a huge difference between the Milchama of conquering Eretz Yisrael to the Milchama of other lands. Eretz Yisrael was already given to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So that's established already, it belongs to the Yidden anyways. When they are coming into the land, the main point is now we're going to need to make sure that the Yidden can actually settle in the land, get the land, settle in it, etc. And therefore, Shevet Levi that's removed Midarkei Olam from the ways of the world have no connection to this type of war whatsoever. But in other lands that a Yiddish king goes and conquers, what's the point of conquering these things? It's not about getting another field, another vineyard, another place to live. But rather, as the Rambam puts it, is laharchiv gvul Yisrael, is to broaden the borders of the Yidden, and to increase the greatness, the fame of the king. And what's the point of that? Because automatically through the greatness and fame of the king, this is increasing Hashem's name, that the greatness of Hashem and Hashem's fame is becoming greater and being more publicized. If that's the case, it has very much to do with Shevet Levi, as they are part of the army of Hashem. They are the ones that are supposed to be out there increasing the fame of Hashem in the world. The Rebbe concludes with a Hayra in Avodah Ruchnis. The Rambam paskins that not only Shevet Levi are the ones that are completely dedicated to the service of Hashem, but any single person that wants to dedicate himself and separate himself from the world, that he too gets a tremendous level of Kedusha, like Shevet Levi. So a person could then think, I'm separated from the world, I'm standing in front of Hashem, I'm serving Hashem, what do I have any connection to the rest of the world? So we tell him on the contrary, you specifically have a connection to fight and wage Hashem's war against Midyan. In other words, to fight and cancel out, get rid of anything that's standing up against Hashem. In Avodah, that would mean, Chassidus explains, Midyan is the idea of fighting, quarreling, sinas chinam. In other words, in Avodah, this is you have to get involved in getting rid of all forms of sinas chinam that brought the galus, and on the contrary, as the army of Hashem, to bring in avas Yisrael, avas chinam, amongst Yidden, which will connect them all to Hashem. And finally, says the Rebbe, a person can still think, okay, it's all well that I'm getting involved directly with Yidden or Yiddishkeit, things that are directly connected to Torah and mitzvahs, but things that are not, what do I have anything to do with them? So we say, no, you have to also participate in the conquering of other lands, meaning to make that other things should also become part of Eretz Yisrael, meaning in Avodah, that even things that on their own are not necessarily crucial and necessary for Yiddishkeit, But you could take them and broaden the borders of Yisrael, meaning to take those things as well and utilize them for Avodas Hashem. And through that, increasing Hashem's greatness and fame in the world. And through this, of course, we hasten the nullification of the Galus. We brought a merit to the broadening of the borders of Eretz Yisrael, also the lands of Keni, Knizi, V'Kadmoini. And finally, to the time Eretz Yisrael will spread out to the whole world, V'vias Mashiach Tzedkeinu B'Kariv Mamash.